Alright everybody, I'm Rich Lewis and welcome to episode 7 of Off Your Soccer. Or in a lot of ways, it's episode 1 of the 24-25 season. We've still got a couple of weeks of the window remaining, but we're starting to get into the thick of it now and we can enjoy some proper football again. So on today's show, I'll be chatting about the Conner Gallagher hokey-cokey, Liverpool's missing checkbook, Dominic Solanke's Harry Kane impression. I'll be asking if West Ham are playing with projects or plasters and having a quick bash at predicting the scores for this weekend's fixtures. So straight into it, Conner Gallagher. So a bit of background. Samu's move from Atletico fell through, which then caused fallen dominoes to be propped back up. So in Conner Gallagher's case, that was propped back up and then chucked on a plane back to London. How Felix was linked to plug that gap in the Samu deal, but if Atletico can't claw back any funds to cover the cost of Julian Alvarez signing, the money is likely not going to be there to complete the Conner Gallagher transfer. So where the hell does this leave Conner Gallagher? You got to imagine he's not going to be feeling great at the moment. If I'm in his shoes, I've already been messed around quite a bit. This place, this institution that I love, that I've grown up with since a young age, that I've been very proud to represent, be captain of, is now basically messing me around. It's not Chelsea's fault, but we in terms of what's happened with the Samu deal, as far as we're aware. But even so, Conner Gallagher's found himself in the middle of this whole thing, and it almost feels like his future now seems to be hinging on whether a deal can be pushed through for João Felix. It all feels very messy. It doesn't feel like Chelsea have got a proper handle on what's going on, and all for the sake of really moving on an academy graduate to bring some money back into the club to help them sort of manage their player portfolio, I suppose. It doesn't feel to me to be acceptable treatment of an academy graduate. Now, following Manchester United for a number of years, we've seen a lot of academy graduates leave, and you can look at maybe other players, more senior players have moved on, and you can think at times things could have been handled better. When David De Gea's contract was coming to an end, for example, that did feel like that could have been handled an awful lot better at the time. But when I think back to academy graduates leaving the club, I don't think I've ever seen anything that has been quite as disrespectful as what's happened to Conner Gallagher at this stage. Obviously, I'm not an avid Chelsea follower, and there may be a more nuance to this situation than I'm aware of. But from an outside perspective, it doesn't look great at all. If he's still there next season, you can't imagine it'll be easy for him. He'll be, obviously, he's a Chelsea fan. He'll want to get out there and do his stuff, and the type of player he is, he's a very honest player. You know, he's not going to affect his will and his desire. But you can't always necessarily know what is going on in a player's mind. Even the player themselves, I don't think necessarily always know what is impacting them or their circumstances at a point in time, how much that impacts them. Then often you'll hear players who've, managed to get a couple of years distance from a situation, reflect back on that period and go, yeah, I wasn't at my best because of this. But they don't necessarily see it now. But it may well be that he'll be there, and I think if he is there, he'll play. I don't think there's any doubt about that whatsoever. There is an uncomfortable situation there now where Chelsea have spent a lot of money again this summer. Spending that money hinges on getting money back into the club. They've sold a lot of academy prospects over the last 2 or 3 years, and to continue with the methods that they're using, selling Gallagher's an important part of that. So it'll be interesting to see what does happen over the next couple of weeks, but you can't necessarily magic clubs to bring £40 million plus to the table. And I think the fee was only where it was at, from what I can remember different reports saying at the time. The fee was lower than what Chelsea would have accepted from a Premier League rival. So I think they're going to be hoping somebody from abroad comes in. Otherwise, they're going to have to lower the amount they were looking for from other Premier League clubs. I don't think they can afford to keep him. I don't think there's anybody else at the club who would bring in the type of money that Conner Gallagher would. So it will be very interesting to see what happens in the next couple of weeks. So moving on from Conner Gallagher to a club who could do with one or two lessons from Chelsea in spending money like there's no tomorrow, and that's Liverpool. Yeah, Liverpool haven't made a move this summer yet, and after the Zubimendi deal didn't get off the ground, the inevitable online FSG outshouts have started doing the rounds. But doing nothing could work out, and it's all very well me saying this as a Manchester United fan. I think it'd be very easy for people listening to this to expect that I've got an agenda here. I don't at all. I think if you look at players who've come into Liverpool over the past 2 or 3 years, you've got your Gravenberch, McAllister, Szoboszlai, Gakpo, Nunes. Then you've got younger players as well who will be looking for opportunities, more opportunities this year, who've had plenty as well. In the couple of years past, your likes of Elliott and Kwanzaa and Bradley and plenty more. There'll be more chances for them. They'll get to interact and sort of gel and bond with the players who've come in over the last couple of years. Also, on top of that, you've got a new manager coming in too. Now, if you end up with a new manager and players who haven't been at the club for a long, long time, a decent amount of time now, yes, but not a long time. You throw all of that into the melting pot together with a load of new transfers, and you probably are, it could be a recipe for disaster. If you only add maybe 1 or 2 players to this, even if there weren't any at all, but you let the new manager get used to that group of players who are still getting to know each other's games and still bonding, it might actually work out for the best for Liverpool. But as I say, it's easy for me to say. You're looking at, obviously Manchester United have done, have made a number of signings. Obviously, as I'm recording this, it's not too long after, and we'll cover this on a future Manchester United pod. We're talking about this not long after the signings of De Ligt and Mazraoui have been completed. But they're two clubs in very different circumstances. Liverpool have had a lot of stability for a number of years now, where Manchester United, there's been a lot of trial and error in terms of trying to get things right, and signings were definitely needed at this end. I don't think that's the case for Liverpool. Obviously, if Liverpool get off to a really difficult start to the season, and by Christmas time or going into the new year they're off the pace, then you'd expect to see something done in the January transfer window. We'll see what happens. If you want to get in touch with us, you can find us on TikTok, on X, on YouTube, on multiple different platforms. Get in touch, drop us a comment, and let us know what you think, Liverpool fans. Now, moving on to a former Liverpool player. Dominic Solanke has made a big money move to Tottenham. When he came through at Chelsea as a young player, there was so much hype. I remember at the time, he almost looked as close as you could get to a dead cert of doing well. Just from the noise that was around him, it seemed greater than a lot of prospects over the number of years leading up to that. And you always get this. Somebody comes along and all the different media outlets are praising them, probably a little bit too much, and you kind of get used to hearing these stories every couple of years or so, that someone's coming along and they're going to be the next big thing, and it often dissipates. There was a genuine feeling with Solanke that wasn't going to be the case, and when he made that move to Liverpool at a young age, it did seem like a massive coup for Liverpool. He wasn't there long. He ended up with 1 goal in 27 appearances and moved to Bournemouth, and you did wonder at that point, is this where his career is going to sort of level out? Is he going to end up being a championship player at Bournemouth, and maybe he's someone who's going to end up going on to be a journeyman and go around the leagues and never quite fulfill his potential? The opposite happened. He found a home at Bournemouth. Obviously, Bournemouth got back to the Premier League. In his last 4 seasons now, he scored 15 goals, then 30, then 7, and then 21 goals last season. 21 goals for Bournemouth last season as a Premier League player. Phenomenal turnaround. And with a lack of quality number 9s out there at the moment, it was inevitable that a club would come calling for him. You look at sort of top centre forwards in the Premier League who maybe were looking to make that step to a top 6 we say top six club. We all know top six is a state of mind. Top six is not a real thing anymore. Yes, those clubs are always there or thereabouts, but you are seeing more clubs now. You likes of Aston Villa and Newcastle and possibly West Ham this season. We'll be going on to West Ham next. Clubs making that step up, and you get new contenders all the time. You would have seen Palace as very much a middling club, and then you look at the way they performed under the new manager at the end of last season, and the rise of Wharton in midfield as well, and you wonder, could they do more next year? So I think, yeah, okay, you're always going to have Manchester City at the top of the pile, but I would go as far as saying any of the teams underneath. Yes, Arsenal have been doing great recently, and of course Liverpool over the past several seasons have been doing fantastic, but there are more challenges, and the idea of a stable six, I think that's gone now, and that's out the window. But having said that, that might be in practical terms on the pitch, but for players, then players will still hold certain clubs in higher regard than others. And for Solanke being at Bournemouth, he more than likely would have been looking at having to move to a traditional top six team or a top European team. And as I was saying before, you're kind of limited in terms of those strikers already proven at Premier League level. So a Solanke and Ivan Toney and Ollie Watkins, who might be looking at your Uniteds, Chelseas, Liverpools, Arsenals, Cities, etc., in terms of making that that next step and that next move to the top tier. Now, making the move to Spurs, you're trying to look at him and go, can he transfer over this rich vein of goal scoring form there? And stating the obvious, it's impossible to know. You do get a feeling with some players more than others that it's going to work, but I genuinely don't know with Solanke. He's got the skills. He is a physical presence. He is hard to defend against. When I've watched him, he causes defenders all sorts of problems. One of the issues he's going to have at Tottenham is that if he goes and scores 15 goals next season, as he's coming for such a large fee, I mean, comparatively by other transfer fees, maybe it's not so big, but still, it's a decent outlay from Spurs. I think we're looking at something in excess of 60 million. And there are going to be comparisons to Harry Kane. They're not going to be fair. It's not going to be right. But if he goes, it's going to work both ways. If he goes and scores 5 or 6 goals in the first 5 or 6 games of the season, the plaudits are going to come out saying Spurs have plugged that gap. If he's maybe only got one or none even in the first sort of several games of the season, you can guarantee you'll be watching Match of the Day and they'll be making those comparisons to Harry Kane, saying he's not on that level, he's not going to be able to fill the gap. So from day one at Tottenham, there's going to be pressure there. Maybe he'll thrive on that and it'll bring the best out of him. I'm obviously not a Tottenham fan by any stretch of the imagination, but I would plead with fans, and that's not necessarily Tottenham fans, but I've played with sort of football fans just to give him a chance, because I think, especially English football fans, because I think he could become a very important player, not just for Tottenham, but for England, if he's allowed to find his feet at Spurs and not have to put up with ridiculous criticism. But we all know in this day and age, that's almost impossible to avoid. So I think his success at Tottenham is going to come down to how he handles that expectation and the inevitable criticism that will come his way if he isn't scoring 20 odd goals from next season onwards. Now, before we go on to the predictions for this weekend's games, we're going to have a little bit of a chat about West Ham, and are West Ham building something here? I think the answer's got to be a resounding yes. Another question to add on to that though, but is it going to last? So let's have a look at the players they've brought in, or at least some of them. There's every chance that they've brought in quite a few, so there's every chance I've missed somebody here. But I believe we've got Aaron Wan-Bissaka is the latest at 26 years of age. Todibo came in not too long ago, centre-back, 24 years of age. Fulkrug, 31. Somerville, 22. Kilman, 27. Gilham, 18. And Guido Rodriguez, 30. So I make that 7, and I'm sure I read somewhere there was 8 earlier. But you've got quite a mixed profile of player there, suggesting that they've brought in a lot of balance. The one thing that probably jumps out to me as a slight concern is Fulkrug, and that's not him himself as a player, but that's more so if West Ham are trying to solve their striker curse by bringing somebody in who is at the latter end of their career, who you're probably going to get 2-3 years out of max. But aside from that, there's a good balance there. I was looking at the signings thinking, why does this feel so familiar? West Ham making signings full of promise, but then also having this nagging doubt of, will they fulfil that promise, and will it still not get them into the Champions League? Will it still not push them into a position amongst the elite as regular European contenders? And I think that feeling of deja vu is there to some degree, because you start looking at West Ham and then you can think of the likes of Benrahma and Fornals and Zuma and Aguerd, and to a lesser extent Ings and Cornet and other players of a similar ilk, players who've come in and you've thought, you know what, especially in the likes of the first 4 or 5 mentioned there, they can help West Ham kick on, they can fill a gap there. They could be important to West Ham for a number of years going forwards, and more often than not, they'll be decent. If you look at Benrahma, Fornal, Zuma, they've been decent for West Ham before moving on, but they've not helped them move on to that next level. And then you can all of a sudden start to look at the signings they've made, and you can create a story there which doesn't work out so well. You can go so Wan-Bissaka 26 actually goes to show the reasons Manchester United got rid of him. He'll be excellent in one-on-one situations in some games, but he'll be caught out at the back post, or he will not offer much going forwards, and the West Ham fans will get on his back and feel like something's lacking and they'll want to see more of him. Todibo will go and have maybe 1 or 2 excellent seasons, and then the vultures will come circling from the bigger clubs and he'll get disgruntled and want to move on. You could actually throw that at the likes of Somerville and Gilham as well, and you very much see a similar arc there potentially. That with Somerville, maybe he'll go more the way of Benrahma and do well, but not fantastic. Fulkrug, as we mentioned before, probably hit some decent numbers. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he gets 15 goals a season there or thereabouts for the next couple of years in the league. And then obviously maybe he just tails off, becomes more of a squad player, and West Ham are back in the market for another striker. Kilman has probably the most potential of that group to stay at West Ham for, you'd imagine, the next 5 years and be a very key player for them. And because he's at 27 now, you can't quite see as much room for manoeuvre in terms of him then moving on to a bigger club still. I think the signing of Max Kilman probably is going to be, in my eyes, the best one for them out of the lot. That's not taking into account, obviously, moving on a Somerville or Gilham or Todibo in a couple of years' time for extortionate money, because you could view a transfer, obviously, as being really successful because you've made a huge profit from it. Godo Rodriguez feels a bit like a sticking plaster at that age. I think he could do a very good job for them for a season or two. From the clips I've seen of him, I think he'll do very well in the Premier League. And as long as he can stay injury-free, he'll be a great signing for the now, but not one so much looking forwards. But if you look at those different situations and put them all together, you kind of start to think, is this a West Ham team that right now looks very exciting and will likely, I think, will do quite well next season, but actually isn't really squad building as such? It's a bit maybe of a false dawn. That's looking at it from the more negative aspect, the negative side of things. But from a more positive side, you're going, okay, but we're bringing in these new exciting players, and if we can add them to Bowen, to Kudus, to Alvarez, maybe to Paqueta, we don't know how that's all going to pan out there with his situation at the moment, but you can start to see a massively exciting team there forming. Just looking at the names in front of me, I mean, you can look from an attacking perspective and go, okay, if we can put something together with Bowen, Kudus, Fulkrug and Somerville, and that sounds like it's going to be dangerous next year, and I don't think any team's going to fancy coming up against that. And then having a defence with, bringing Wan-Bissaka and Todibo into that backline with Kilman. They've signed 3/4 of a back four this season, which looks strong and looks balanced as well. I think you'd have Kilman on the left, with Todibo over the right of that back four. If I've got their feet right in my mind there, Wan-Bissaka will be a very, very strong customer too. I think they covered quite well in goal as well. Midfield, maybe you could still see something done in those areas there, bringing in someone at a younger age to compete and add more steel to the squad. So there's definitely reason to be optimistic for the now. And if they can resist offers from teams over the next 2, 3, 4 years, West Ham could make that move from being a club that cashes out when a player sort of comes into their own to actually hanging on to those players and really kicking on themselves, because I think they're starting to get a good group there. And I think you could be looking at a team whereby if they hang on to them and then add next year one really key player, the same again next year, and get some stability, and obviously hopefully things go well with a new manager, things could be really looking up for West Ham. And they could add to that really strong competition at the top end of the Premier League, not just on a one-off basis, which they've shown they're more than capable of doing over the last several years, but on a regular basis. Now, moving on to having a quick go at predicting the games for the weekend. We're not going to go into too much depth. We might touch on a few points here, but let's just get straight into it. We've got the first game Friday evening between Manchester United and Fulham. Now, I have settled on a 3-1 win for Manchester United. Having watched United in pre-season, they are looking much, much better than at this stage last season. Results to one side, they're looking more robust. They look like they've got a proper structure. They almost looked shattered last season before the season even began. It was really worrying watching them at times in that pre-season, thinking these guys need a break. They've just come back from a break, but they really need a break. It's not looking like that at all now. The signings have been positive. They're starting to get more flexibility in the squad. Maybe it would have been great if there'd been a little bit more time for players to sort of gel with each other, particularly with the new guys and the players coming back from longer holidays after the Euros. Fulham will definitely cause United problems, and I think there's a goal in the game for Fulham. I'm predicting Smith Rowe will get the goal too. I think it's inevitable there's going to be a debut goal there, if not a goal and assist at least. I think United though will turn it on as the game goes on, especially at reinvigorated Old Trafford with the fans behind them coming out of the new tunnel. I think there's just going to be a lot of momentum with United from a psychological perspective going into that game, but it is definitely not going to be an easy ride. And if Fulham were to come away with the points, it wouldn't be a massive surprise. Next up, the first game on Saturday is a 12:30 Ipswich versus Liverpool. I think it's one of those where you see sometimes the first game of the season, it doesn't matter if you're a new team up against one of the top teams. I think you've got that wave of excitement of coming back to the league, especially for Ipswich being a home game too and playing Liverpool. The fans will absolutely love that, and I think they'll cause Liverpool problems. I can see them taking the lead. It wouldn't surprise me if you're looking at the scores coming through on Sky Sports within the first sort of 10 minutes of that and you're seeing Ipswich goal go in. I do think Liverpool though will gradually turn the screw, and I think it wouldn't surprise me if there's a late Liverpool winner in that game just to sneak over the line. And that's not being critical of Liverpool in any way. It's just you get that wave of momentum with teams that have just come back up. But I don't think Ipswich are necessarily going to have enough in the tank to see the game out, and I think they will just come unstuck in the end against Liverpool. Moving on to the 3:00 kickoffs, Arsenal versus Wolves. I'm going for a comfortable 3-0 for Arsenal in that game. Wolves have had a quietish pre-season and transfer window, no waves coming out of there. They do have stability on their side, but this is a game that Arsenal will expect to win. I think that there's no major injury issues as far as I'm aware. Wolves, I think, will just be lacking. I mean, losing Pedro Neto is going to be a massive, massive blow. It's just going to drop that morale. If they could get in, an exciting player or two this week, maybe that'll pick them up a little bit. But at the moment, I think that could have dented their morale and potentially could be hard to lift themselves for an away trip to the Emirates on the first game of the season. Everton-Brighton. And I have no idea which way this one's gonna fall. I think Brighton do have the stronger team of the two, but Everton have been building nicely over the summer. I think Yeah, I think you can really toss a coin here. I've gone 2-2. I think that'll be goals being the opening game of the season. I don't think that'll be caution. I think they'll both teams, Everton want to put on a show for the fans, but if they do have a bit of a go, I think it'll leave them a bit shorter at the back and allow Brighton some chances. This could be anything though. 2-2 is almost a placeholder scoreline there. I won't put any money on that whatsoever. Newcastle, Southampton, I'm going to go a comfortable Newcastle 4-0 victory. If Southampton had been at home, I'd have maybe fancied a draw in this one just for the home fans and being back up. But no, Newcastle have done some steady business this summer. They've got a little bit of stability there. I don't think they've got too many injury issues. I'm fully expecting that if they get into their stride, it'll be a very comfortable afternoon for Newcastle. Forest Bournemouth, very much in the same vein as Everton Brighton. It could be anything. It really could. Both those teams on their day can really turn it on. They've both got some very good players. You'd expect maybe Forest bring a little bit more being, at home. I don't necessarily think it's going to pan out like that. I've gone 1-1. I think there's a goal in the game for both those teams. Obviously, first game of the season is setting the precedent for what's going to come the week, in the weeks to come. 1-1 is where I'm going for Forest versus Bournemouth. And again, in different ways, what West Ham Villa, that really could go either way. Who could turn up on the day? I think there's shades here of Villa's opening game of the season against Newcastle last year, where Newcastle absolutely blew them away. And it would not surprise me if either West Ham or Villa absolutely blew the other team away. I've split the difference and gone 2-2 again. I'd be very surprised if this was 0-0. And saying that, it means it probably will be. But I'd be very surprised if it was. I think there's definitely goals in this game. West Ham will be showing off their shiny new toys. Aston Villa will be wanting to show that, look, we are a Champions League team now. I think if I had to tip the scales one way, I've gone 2-2, but I'd maybe go a home win for West Ham. First game of the season, but we'll see what happens there. On to Sunday, we've got Brentford versus Crystal Palace. I think that momentum that Palace gathered towards the end of last season will carry on over into this year. Brentford, I think, have made a few moves in the transfer market, but I don't think there's anything there to really get fans too excited about. And I think Palace will sneak a victory there. Then the big afternoon kickoff is Chelsea versus Manchester City. I think it won't be too big of a game though. Chelsea have been struggling to put it together under Maresca in pre-season so far, which is understandable. They've just been sort of getting used to the way Pochettino played and was doing things and started getting some momentum, and then they've had to rip up that rule book and start all over again, and it's been slow going at first. I think Chelsea will grow into themselves as the season goes on. But potentially that change of management may have cost them another good finish this year. It may well end up taking them, another 2/3 of this season to find consistency. I think there'll be some good results. I don't think this is going to be one of them, though. I think you're going to see something almost a little bit closer to the pre-season result. I think it'll be a 4-1 victory for Man City. I think Chelsea, it could be tight up to half-time, but I think City will eventually sort of pull away. I don't see too much hope for Chelsea in this game. If they can, maybe if they get an early goal and get the fans behind them, maybe it could be a little bit different. But who knows? It's very early days. It's going to be very interesting to see if Chelsea do take to Maresca. If they do get a result, though, it could massively help the process and help them further along there. So yeah, that'll be definitely one to watch on Sunday. And then finally, it's Leicester versus Spurs on Monday evening. It's the Gary Lineker derby. I've gone for a 2-1 victory for Spurs, very much following the same logic as the Ipswich Liverpool game. I think you've got a team come back up. It's a home game for Leicester. The fans will be behind them again. Totally wouldn't surprise me if they took the lead, but I do think as the game progresses, Spurs will just have enough to get over the line in that game too, so I'm going for a 2-1 win for Spurs. Anywho, we're not too far now from the kickoff on Friday night for Manchester United Fulham, first game of the Premier League season. I will definitely be following up the weekend's action with a pod at some point next week. Before then, there will be a Manchester United You've Only Come to Hear United pod, possibly before we kick off on Friday night. If not definitely before the end of this weekend. I'll be putting out some content before the end of the weekend. If I don't catch you before then, I hope you have a great time, enjoy the football, and I will speak to you all soon. See ya.